Okay, we're online here, so let's go ahead and get started. This is a work session of the Poquoson City Council for Monday, July 25th. And two items that we want to talk about here this evening. One is just a continuation item. We're going to talk about a little bit about the results of what we've seen on surveys and any next steps that council wants to pursue on Bunning Lane. And then the feeding back. Oh, sorry. That we'll have to switch mics here. And then the second item on the agenda is to have some early discussion. And this is a work session. It's not on the main body of tonight. It's scheduled for a future public hearing, and that's on a request for a conditional use permit to operate a brewery near on the Phoebe Harcum piece right here by City Hall. So with that said, I think we'll start with Bunning Lane and go through the stealth survey information. Cliff, if we could, and or if you'd like to kick off.
Let me go first. Members of council, thank you for allowing us to continue this discussion this evening. You will recall in May of this year, council had a discussion. It centered around citizen concerns in the area of Bunting Lane, specifically regarding traffic. At that meeting, you asked that we do some additional things and come back to you and continue the discussion. Specifically, we were asked to step up enforcement, install 2 children at play signs. Additionally, we took some additional traffic measures, both using the traditional trailer that we use, which is visible, and that information is in your package. Also, we were asked to put a stealth stat, which is a device which also measures traffic but is not obvious. The one that we had was it had expired, let's just say that, and we needed to order a new one, and that was a bit of the delay and why last month we were unable to have this conversation. In a few minutes, Chief Bowen will summarize the stealth stat information. What he tried to do was mimic in terms of days a week and duration the initial study that we had done and provided for you last time we talked. And so he pulled that today, and he'll talk about that in a minute. Additionally, included in your package is some information which had been largely presented previously to council in October of 2014. Ellen led that presentation. Essentially what you have is additional information regarding VDOT's formal traffic calming program, which is a program of physical changes to roadways. Their advice, which in terms of VDOT and how they relate to us, it is guidance, but it is not rules that you have to specifically follow. Thoughts about how physical changes could be made to roads, things like speed humps, traffic circles, and others. Also, the importance of community awareness, stepped up enforcement, looking at less costly, non-physical changes to the roads, such as pavement markings and additional signage. Additionally, in your package is information pertaining to the what they call the residence district, which is a increased speed zone, whereby should council wish to, and you meet the findings required, establish a maximum speeding fine on a defined area of a road of up to $200. Lastly, we have one additional thing that we began to talk about as we were looking at signage. One thing you may want to consider here or in other parts of the city as well over time is something which is sort of in between the traditional trailer, the speed radar trailer, and a stealth stat, which is a permanently mounted solar-powered speed indicator sign, which essentially is a flashing sign which will show the motors how fast they're going. The ones I've seen have been typically placed in proximity to the posted speed limit sign itself. as a more constant and real-time reminder. What we have queued up for you is that 5-minute video that VDOT had, that we had looked at in October of 2014, that talks about traffic calming. But what I think, if it's okay with council, go ahead and ask Chief Bowen to go right into what he's found and provide that information. And then should you like to see that traffic calming video again, because you have seen it previously, we've got it queued up and ready to show. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. May 19th, at sometime in the afternoon, we put the radar trailer on Bunting Lane, and we ran data until Monday afternoon, the 21st. This past Thursday, the 21st, we did the same thing with stealth staff, in almost the exact same location, catching the same direction, which would have been
You gotta hold it.
which would have been northbound on Bunting Lane, approaching Poquoson Avenue. Using the same methodology that the software for the radar trailer uses, I looked at the data from the stealth stat and found really nothing statistically significant difference between the two. For example, we had a total of 1,244 cars come through at speeds at 26 miles per hour or higher, with a total of 3,900 cars in May. This time we had 3,964 cars with a total of 1,258 cars that were speeding at a speed of 26 miles per hour or higher. Almost insignificant statistically speaking. Between 26 and 35 miles an hour, we had 1,244 cars versus 1,231 using the radar trailer, which was visible. Between 36 and 45, we had 14 cars this time, and we had 12 last time. So so it really didn't make any difference whether the trailer was there and the visibility in terms of the data we got. And again, the time was about the same, and it was 3,900 cars in May, and we had 3,960 cars go through in the same direction this weekend. So that's the data. At this point, of course, from the police department standpoint, we usually focus, we're focusing on those, on enforcement level, which is generally, some miles an hour above the speed limit. But again, the data was useful because we can look at the time and date where we saw violators, which allows us to target our enforcement actions during a particular time and day, which we will do and continue to do that. So.
Okay. When I looked at the data, and I passed it around to the audience so they could see it, and so we wouldn't be talking out of school here so everybody can see it. What I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Chief, maybe I misinterpreted it, but what I saw here was the vast majority of folks traveling under 35, and with a rare exception, I think you had one high point of 45, and then you had, but the vast majority of those that were exceeding the posted speed limit of 25 were in the 25 to 30 mile an hour range. Is that?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. We did the 85th percentile, which means 85% of the vehicles are we're doing 28 miles an hour or less. We had one vehicle come through at 45.
Right.
And that was the high point. The rest of the vehicles that were in the excess of the 35 mile an hour were between, were up to, we had no one doing 40 to 44. We had one vehicle at 45, two vehicles at 39, four vehicles at 38, two vehicles at 37, five vehicles at 36. So a total of 20 vehicles that were speeding at either 35 or higher out of the 3,964.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time reading this. I have to, sorry. I'm having a hard time reading this. I have to apologize. I just got in at 1 a.m. and I did not get any of this data until this afternoon. I didn't have a chance to look at it. So how many cars were speeding? Where am I seeing this? Of the most recent report on the front page?
No, I think the most telling is the graph, which is page
2.
Yeah, page 2, and basically that gives you a recordation, however you want to pronounce that, of the total flow of traffic, with your most obvious speed being peak And then I think what Chief was referring to is the 85th percentile of folks. Not saying that we don't have some offenders down there traveling at a rate higher than they need to be, but by and large, the community is seeing adherence to the law within 5 miles an hour,
Okay.
which is
Yes,
below ticketed
Again,
range.
I'm not interested in percentage, I'm interested in numbers, and I find it difficult to read this graph. I've asked the chief to send me the raw data so I can work my own numbers. Also, I have to say that dealing with any of the numbers of a speed below, I would say 15 miles per hour or lower, really is not measuring traffic flow, but is measuring people coming off of Floyd or Holly or out of my driveway or Miss Andrea Lunis's driveway or something. It's a lot of non-traffic. And so I would venture to say when dealing with this data, it would be smart to eliminate, it looks to me like almost 36% of the data, which, well, not quite that much, but that's below 20 miles per hour. But people do not drive down that road below 20 miles per hour. So I want to work these numbers in a manner that is telling as to the traffic and the number of vehicles that are going at a speed, not percentages, because it doesn't matter if 10% of the vehicles are speeding, if that means that 200 of them are coming down my road fast.
Well, the data that you're looking at on the graph, when you look at the left parallel, it's number of cars. It's not percentage. It accounts for every vehicle trip that came down Bunning Lane.
Right.
When you go across there, you add all those cars and you should come up to,
I can't do that in my head.
right, you should come across to 3,600 or so trips, which is what the chief basically laid out. So, I mean, if you'd like the data at a different point to discount driveways, I'm sure we can go back and take another round of data. But what I heard was,
Hundreds of cars speeding. I see hundreds of cars speeding. Hundreds, thousands actually, when I look at the data.
well, can you put this on the screen so people are not confused? Is there a way?
I've had time to work the numbers, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know that we have the
Yeah.
Okay. That's just going above 32. Okay.
Okay. So basically, what I'm saying is we've got solid data now. That's the way I look at it. So the data is what you're going to respond to. If you want to massage the data, do whatever you want to with it. Numbers are numbers. You can tell many different stories with numbers. So we have a minority of folks that are traveling at a speed, and what I hear you saying, Chief, is you can target the times based on recurring things of when to patrol.
Yes, sir.
Right.
We can use that data to assist us in when we want to put people down there.
Okay. So then the next thing is the level of the issue with speed down there. Is that something that we want to do something of a traffic calming nature of what we've seen before? Or do we want to, or is council ready to basically say, hey, we want to do this, we want to do A, then B, then C? Or do y'all want time to review the data?
Well, I think if I understood what the chief said, that 20 cars out of all 3,964 were going at a rate of speed that they would issue a ticket,
Right.
That's correct.
which I don't care how you manipulate the data. 20 cars out of 3,964, to me, doesn't warrant doing anything drastic. And if we go to the increased fine for speeding, I'm going to want to see a whole lot of signatures on a piece of paper saying that the people that live in and around that area agree with it.
Okay.
How many cars were going that fast on the street that we reduced for you, buddy?
Tracy, that was reduced for a totally different reason. That was reduced so that people could ride go-karts or golf carts down the road. It was not reduced
People on my
because
street
of
would like to
speeding.
walk and ride their bikes.
Okay. So what is a meaningful measure that we can do? Because what I'm basically hearing Buddy say is that in his opinion, and it takes all of us to make these opinions count, right? Is that it is not worthy of making structural changes to the street, but that's not the only traffic calming methods that's the only thing I saw on the VDOT the last time we saw was things like divots, holes, raised pavement, but simply stated what I think the way that I see the data, and the next obvious step that I'd like to see us employ is more of just a permanent posting down there of basically something that reminds you of your speed. Because it seems to me like if you're going through Bunning Lane, and I've traveled it many times, I'm not saying I'm an expert on it, but the one thing is you have to keep your eyes on the road and not necessarily on your speedometer because of the narrowness of the road, the amount of turning movements that I've seen as I've traveled that road. So maybe something at eyesight that reminds people of how fast they're going, and a gentle reminder that to slow down from the city standpoint. I think one of the most effective traffic calming measures I saw was actually done by a citizen down there. And I really encourage, and I'm really appreciative of the neighborhood themselves policing that issue, not just depending on enforcement by the city police. Not saying that city police won't enforce. I think Chief Bowen has made that clear. He will enforce. He has some new data on what times to look. But simply stated, I'd like to see us take a phased approach before we get to giving them the $250 sign. And I agree with you, Buddy, that we need to make sure we have neighborhood buy-in when they do that.
Also, I have learned since our last meeting that putting a stop sign as a traffic calming measure is not legal. So we need to wipe that off the table as an option.
I'm good with it.
So.
I don't think, is anybody from council still behind this? Think the stop sign's still a good, I think that's the one unanimous point we've all got here is
Well,
that.
it's not a legal option for traffic calming purposes, so.
We wouldn't have to use it for traffic calming.
Well,
All right, so we're not going to do the stop sign, so the next thing, just my suggestion for y'all's consideration is to put up basically I think they're pole mounted or whatever, but they're permanent, right? And they will stay in that neighborhood and it basically will remind people how fast they're going with the flashing lights like you see in the work zones now. And we can set that at any threshold you want. You can set it right at 25.
With the solar unit?
Yes.
The Tom Jones and Ellen looked at a number of them. It ranged from between about 3,500 to about 5,000, depending on the specifics of the unit and whether or not it's solar or electric. But that's the neighborhood of estimate.
A good investment for the safety of the neighborhood.
I'd like to see maybe a contest at our high school. I bet you we might have some young people who could come up with something.
Yeah.
Essentially, give them a $1,000 award for, scholarship.
To make one?
I bet we've got people here who could.
I'm not doubting that you have people that can make them. What I would say is that $3,500 to $5,000 is a small investment for the safety of just a single person. So it's a small investment, and I think a logical next step. I don't know.
The one thing, just to reiterate, add to that, you have folks down on, I guess it's Ridge Road, or the one that is 25.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one that's 35, they want it to be 25. So once you start setting that precedent for putting those type signs up, you're gonna have folks that are looking for them all over the place. That's a concern. They're not cheap.
When the Ridge Road brought us in, I believe it was 97 signatures of folks saying they wanted that speed limit reduced. And the pasture
Right.
brought us in a pile of signatures. I don't remember that. But, yeah. If people, whatever people want, we kind of generally agree with.
Right.
But we need to know that a bunch of folks want it.
I'm talking about the signs at 3,500 a pop.
It's already
Yeah.
25.
Right.
That's not gonna change it, but the signs are for people that have 25-mile-an-hour zones in their neighborhoods that want 3,500 signs up, that could grow real quick. Sure. Be conscious of it.
No, and though we can't do them all in 1 year,
Right.
I think we can say that that's a worthwhile investment over time. Okay? But the question is,
Data here pretty much approximates a normal distribution anyway. So it could probably be extrapolated to nearly any road anywhere, any population anywhere. So that's something else to keep in mind. Its mean is pretty close to the speed limit.
so thoughts down, Dr. Vernal? You think you can support that if we put that on a future council thing?
So I think that no extreme methods are needed. I don't know whether additional signage would be of any benefit at all. If it's sufficient now, I've been down there a few times, didn't count the number of signs, but if an additional reminder sign might be of some benefit.
I think that should be part of any plan, would be to evaluate where the signs have been in the past, where they are now, and what the condition and their visibility. That just makes common sense to do that.
As well as possibly painting white lines on the edges. We've never had that, and that might make people recognize it's a narrow street. It might just point that out.
Yeah, I think that's a logical. That's the one thing that I see about many of the. I will tell you, Bunning Lane, the ones we just talked about, Bunning Lane, Ridge Road, the ones that are the older original roads that don't have all the modern markings, have cars parked on the side, have kids in the yards. I will tell you that most people, and if they are, they're probably the most dangerous driver, are not locked into their speedometer. If their head is up, this is a heads-up reminder of, just like when we're driving through a construction zone on I-64, and you're watching the Jersey barrier on one side of you and the car or the truck in the lane next to you, and it's a heads-up display. And I think it's a logical next move for a neighborhood that's concerned, rightfully concerned, and if it saves one accident, then it's paid for itself, right?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think looking at visibility issues too, trees cut back, any place where a child could hide behind, unintentionally not be seen by a car approaching, stumps, all those kinds of things, I would think that would all be part of the plan to increase visibility so people could see up ahead at least 50 feet away from the road.
Okay.
Minus the natural barriers you're going to get with cars and driveways. Understood that.
You good?
But that'll improve that, the feeling of safety and the understanding that visibility is better.
Are you good? All right. So what I'm hearing is a consensus to kind of move forward with that increased road markings, the evaluation of white lines on the side of the road, an evaluation of the existing postings for speed, any kind of kids playing in the neighborhood signs, those sorts of things. A look at basically the shrubbery near the street and this sign, and I think you can bring that on at the next council meeting, and we can move forward.
I got one more question about Quick Cliff. It says on this, the $200 fine sign program, up to a maximum of $200 for exceeding the speed limit. Is that reckless driving? Would be the 200? This is maximum?
No, that's the speeding infraction. Reckless driving is a class 1 misdemeanor. That's up to $2,500 in a year in jail for reckless driving. That is just the speeding infraction.
So is that plus that 2,500?
Absolutely.
Well, right now, I think that's the last place that we could go if the situation warrants it. But I don't think that we're there yet.
No.
Okay.
And we'll be using the data to do some additional enforcement here in the coming weeks. So.
Okay. Now that we've got that stealth unit, I guess it'd be interesting to see it run more frequently in lots of trouble spots. Okay, so let's not just get locked down on Bunny Lane. Okay, thanks. Helen, you didn't even have to say anything. What have you got to say for us tonight?
I like those signs, the
Okay.
solar powered speed limit signs. I think
Okay.
they do a lot of good.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. All right, so the next item is just basically our work session in advance of a public hearing scheduled for the next council meeting, I believe. And this is a conditional use permit for a small independent craft brewery. Straight Shot Brewery, I believe, is still the name of it. And this would be on here adjacent to City Hall. So how would you like to proceed with this?
Kevin Wine will present the initial brief for staff. I would also point out that Mr. Straight is here as well, and as customary, you may wish to afford him just a few minutes to introduce his project at some point to you as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wheeler, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. As has grown a custom when we have a higher impact land use application, it's been our standard operating procedure to present it to you all first after it's completed its time with the Planning Commission, and present it to you in a work session prior to the public hearing. In this case, this application is scheduled for your August meeting, provided there are no hiccups this evening. But the city has received a request from Mr. Sam Straight, property owned by Phoebe Harcum. It's our neighbor just to my left here. The property, let's see, is approximately 4 acres, or it's 2.4 acres, excuse me. And the applicant has expressed a desire to construct a brewery on the property with a supporting tap room and outdoor beer garden. The brewery would have a seating capacity for up to 200 patrons, and the total square footage will be approximately 6,000 square feet. Half of that which would serve the brew house, the traditional manufacturing component, and the other 50% would serve the beer garden, the tap room. The property is zoned Village Commercial, VC, and really with this conditional use permit, we are taking the brewery use out of the proposal, and that's what the conditional use permit would be for. Strictly the brewery, because the tap room will function much like a restaurant use, and those are permitted by right within the Village Commercial District. So any other component that would be almost accessory, it is permitted by right in the Village Commercial District. Actually, specifically bars are permitted in our comp plan within the Village Commercial District. So this application was necessitated by that brewery use. The breweries, or beverage manufacturing, if you will, are only permitted in one zoning district in the city, and that's the Research and Development District. That's the north side of the Big Woods, oddly enough, coming in from York County, so it'd be to your left there. The Research and Development District, it's the blue in this map here. So there's Victory Boulevard. You can see the north and south portions of the Victory Boulevard area, the Big Woods, zone that. But this property, as I mentioned, zoned Village Commercial. It actually has some right-of-way up to its property line because it's right there at the traffic circle at City Hall Avenue. So that does come up to the property line. But here's an aerial of the property. You can see it's immediately to the east of the City Hall complex, approximately 700 feet south of Victory Boulevard. It's in close proximity to a lot of adjoining zoning districts. In fact, immediately to its northeast is the B2 Business Commercial District. It's not far from the General Commercial District, which is very similar to the B2 district as far as uses are considered. And it's that purple that you see. The gray on this map is the Village Commercial District, and as I mentioned, that light blue is the Research and Development District. You can see To your far right, we have some yellow. That's getting into the R1, low-density residential district. As I mentioned, the property is just outside of the City Hall complex here. In fact, to the right in this picture, you can see the City Hall complex. In the background there, you can see the Howard Hanna for sale sign. That's the property that we're talking about. Additionally, the city erected a land use application sign out there. Some various angles of it. The property is heavily forested right now, undeveloped, has mature vegetation throughout. It's the applicant's intention to retain as much of that as they can. And he's here and can certainly elaborate on that. But here is a conceptual mock-up, if you will, of the proposal. You can see that there will be a kitchen. That it won't serve as your traditional brew pub immediately. They want to introduce food somewhere down the road, but they would certainly make the provisions in their original plans here. And then the brew house would make up, like I said, 50% of the available area. The applicant, they'll have 10 BBLs, and that's just a unit for measuring beverages or liquids. But one BBL, it's a barrel, and one barrel is essentially 31 gallons, to give you some perspective. The first year, they do not anticipate making any more than 200 or so of those barrels, about 600 or so gallons. So it's not a heavy use as far as what you traditionally associate with a manufacturing use of this nature. 5-10 years ago, when you would think of a brewery, at least I would associate what they do down in Williamsburg at Anheuser-Busch or something of that nature. This is it's begun to shift really over the last decade, and we've gotten into these smaller craft breweries, and they almost operate autonomously within themselves. In fact, with this proposal, they would not really want to get into distribution, because that's a whole other animal. It would be consumed on site, and it would be part of the draw. As a part of the application, the applicant has provided us with some, not his own renderings, but what they conceptualize the site to consist of. You see some very sleek steel brewing equipment, exposed wood for the tap room, things of that nature. As I mentioned, the CUP would be solely for the brewery operation. The additional components are permitted by right. And these types of uses function much more like a restaurant use than a bottle manufacturing use. In fact, that's for the traffic data that we use, the Transportation Engineers Manual. We used a quality restaurant to get a gauge of how many vehicular trips this would generate during a peak hour. And I hesitate to say it would create approximately 108 according to that calculation, but that seems quite high during our PM peak hour. That's if they would be slammed packed. Because these uses turn over guests a little less than what you would think of a typical restaurant. So, however, that was the closest use we could categorize it as. One thing that I have not touched on, while the right-of-way does go right up to the property line, there's always been the interest on the city's behalf of connecting that to Alpha Street, connecting the traffic circle outside. There are two properties that stand in the way of that now. This is one. But the applicant has expressed a willingness to work with his city in dedicating the right-of-way needed, at least on his parcel, to make that happen. And that would be a 50-foot right-of-way. That would take up quite a bit of the property, but the applicant believes that they can still make their development proposal work. It is in the city's ARB district, and as such, they would have to make an application to the Architectural Review Board. And I didn't touch on this earlier, but I think it's important to note, if we look at the Village Commercial District today, this is probably a use that would be permitted by right. However, the Village Commercial uses were established back in 1996, and we haven't changed those much over the years. And this is an industry that has really picked up steam, and actually fits light in line with the intent of the district. So the Planning Commission met last week, last Monday, on this application and held a public hearing. And they have recommended this application to you by a vote of 4-0, so a unanimous recommendation. And in doing so, they cited that this would be a unique use for the city. Additionally, that it would be quite compatible with the intent of the Village Commercial District. I'm not going to go verbatim over the conditions here, but there are 3 that are unique to this application. And one of them is for condition number 2 that's on your screen now. This use permit is for the allowance of a beverage brewery with supporting tap room and shall not be construed for approval of any use that cannot be identified as such. This condition is constructed to allow some leeway on the applicant's behalf if they foray into other types of brewing. Perhaps when I get into the distillery game, that's common to make the most out of the equipment and such. So there's some leeway there that can certainly be tightened, could certainly be loosened. But that is something that we thought was important with any use permit. Number 3, at no point shall the square footage proposed for the brewery manufacturing use exceed 50% of the overall usable square footage. And that's really to keep the use in check, that it does not become a full-scale brewery that we traditionally think of, a more manufacturing intense use than it does the brew pub use, which is what this application is for. So if you were to expand to 8,000 or 10,000 square feet, we're still keeping a 50-50 ratio there on the tap room use and kitchen use and the brew house. And lastly, number 7 here, prior to any approval of the development plans, the developer must agree to dedicate a 50-foot right-of-way acceptable to the city and compatible with VDOT roadway standards to allow for the future connection to Alpha Street Extended and/or Beta Street. This is really just a connectivity condition here. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation. Additionally, Mr. Straight is here. He can certainly speak to his application, and I can certainly address any questions you may have.
Yeah, can you go back to one of your, let me see, go all the way back to the beginning here. All right, let's go forward. All right, the brewery, I just want you to take more of a long-term view, and this is with the Planning Commission, because it didn't get lost on me that the R&D district would be the only place that something like this would be allowed. I would just like y'all to look at the other zoning districts.
Okay.
So that it's not in the future always a conditional use permit process. It just seems like B2 would have already had this use, that sort of thing. So just look at it if you would. I'm not saying that that's an approved thing, that just take it through the process. And then to your comment on VC and the, go forward a couple more slides. Keep going. Okay, keep going one more. Right there. I just want to remind you that I came on council in 1996, okay? So you just called me antiquated.
Well, my deepest apologies.
Okay, I just want to point that out, you know.
Get his apology in the back of his resignation letter tomorrow for you, Mayor.
All right, just want to make sure you understand. I mean, and that really is, it kind of highlights what we just talked about. Mm-hmm. But it's hard for us to predict what the business model is, and I would always encourage us to think how to do it, how to allow business to succeed without coming before council all the time.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I would just like to see us get to that mindset instead of us having to approve them one by one. Okay, so that's all I've got. But any other questions of Kevin before we ask Mr. Straight to come up?
Just one on the access to it. The normal access in the absence of connection to Alphas would be around the circle and into it? Would be the normal way that you would go into it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
You go, I'm sorry.
Also, one other question, and whether he decides he wants to do this down the road or now, if the beer, the brew is so good, people want it outside of the area, do these conditions allow him to distribute it outside of the area as well?
Yes, that would not, the conditions as they are presented would not constrain him now. He would be able to do that.
I didn't notice, were there conditions about, I don't know what the conditions are or what the rules are about keeping, is there an odor with brew houses?
There typically is, however, Mr. Straight shared with the Planning Commission last week that all odors would be contained to the brew house. And that's generally one of the larger concerns with these, especially at a larger scale. With this small scale, there wasn't a ton of concern with that anyway. However, he plans on keeping those in-house.
Yep.
Generally, I always say that we don't want to smell it or hear it. So if you're pretty sure we can't, I'm good with it.
We'll let Mr. Straight address that because he's been in this business for a while. So, anything else, Kevin?
That's
Appreciate it,
I'm
Mr.
sure
Thank
that
you.
the people of Williamsburg think that smell smells like money to them. I'm sure they don't mind it.
And a lot of folks that live here in Poquoson and drive over there.
Kevin, just one thing, just not to
Mr. Straight,
mislead
you wanna
the
come up?
public. I think you said 200 barrels, and each barrel is 31 gallons, so it's not 600 gallons, it's 6,200 gallons, just so we don't mislead the public. And
My apologies.
That's no problem.
I'm a
I just-
planner, not a math major, so.
Okay.
And maybe we could get Mr. Straight to put cameras and microphones in the beer garden so we can have meetings there.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, Mr. Straight, welcome. Basically, you kind of saw the presentation. What else would you like council to know about what it is that you're proposing?
I obviously agree with everything Kevin brought forth. He's asked me quite a few questions about this before he put together his presentation. I guess I'd like to maybe read you part of, or just summarize the mission statement we have. My brother and I have really put a lot of thought into this. It's something we've been considering for many years now. And after moving down here, I've thought this would be a great place to do this. I think it's going to bring some really added value to the community, and we want to be able to fit within the community and make that a positive contribution. As a brewery, obviously, we're going to bring this independent craft brewing model here. It's a very popular industry nationwide, and it's been an economic driver for many communities, and we want to have that happen here. We are trying to create something that is going to be less impactful than some of these operations have been in the past. My brother's an environmental engineer, and we're going to be utilizing a lot of sustainable technologies in the construction of the place, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to build from the ground up rather than take on an existing building. So we're going to be being very cautious with not only our usage of energy and water, but also being conservative with our discharge, and you're addressing the odors and that sort of thing. As a small-scale brewery, only making 10 barrels at a time, which is quite small compared to, again, something like Anheuser-Busch, we're able to actually contain that all in-house. We're not even having a chimney of any kind. It's all the effluence in terms of the steam and whatnot that comes off the brew kettle all condenses and comes back in for us to dispose of that way. So there shouldn't be any odors outside. Same with the fermentation process itself. That's all inside the brewery and does not get discharged anywhere. We're also going to be very committed to using any Virginia-sourced agricultural products we can. One thing that's happened in many states as the brewing industry has risen, as you get a lot of farms converting over to supplying for those things, and we're going to be very interested in using local hop production, finding places that are malting their own barley. There's actually a couple places right now that we can actually utilize to get started as far as that commitment goes. And primarily, we just want to make this place a regular destination, not only for the residents and those in nearby municipalities, York County, Hampton, Newport News, but also hopefully attract people here along the state craft brewing map and bring tourists to the area to enjoy more of what we have to offer here in Poquoson. So, and I'll
Thank you.
happily answer any questions you might have about the project in addition.
Questions? Good. Hey, thank you, Mr. Straight.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And thank you, staff, for bringing us that, and so that we have a couple, well, actually, we have a month to think about it before the public hearing, so that's a good thing. Anything, if nothing else, and we'll close this work session and move on to regular session.